If you're in the leadership class, you have, and I mean, I've been in it my whole life. I know. You have a moral obligation to admit it.
Yes.
Because once you admit it out loud, then you realize there are, massive benefits to it, but there are also massive obligations to it. They're shirking their duty.
Dave Smith reveals the truth about the Obamas to Tucker Carlson, and I think especially regarding recent speculation about them maybe putting in Michelle Obama as the replacement for Biden, there are some polls that show Michelle has the best electoral chance against Trump, although I'm a little skeptical of that for reasons we'll talk about in today's video. And I think in many ways, Dave Smith reveals the dirty playbook that Democrats have done with their political candidates for years, and Joe Biden is, of course, no exception to that rule. It's worth pointing out, I guess it's worth visiting this viral clip of Dave Smith and Tucker Carlson. So with that said, folks, be sure to leave a like on today's video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and let's get into it.
If you're in the leadership class, you have, and I mean, I've been in it my whole life. I know. You have a moral obligation to admit it.
Yes.
Because once you admit it out loud, then you realize there are, massive benefits to it, but there are also massive obligations to it. They're shirking their duty.
That's right.
That's what they're actually doing.
And that's actually the opposite of being noble. It's fraudulent.
It's disgusting.
Yes, and it's a lie. Your whole thing is based on a lie.
Disgusting.
It's Sam Bankman-Fried.
Of course.
Right? Oh, I just drive like a shitty little Toyota. It's like, oh, actually, you're defrauding.
Michelle Obama goes to Princeton for free.
Yeah.
And has been in the ruling class her whole life.
Yeah.
And she's still lecturing you about how she's a victim of racism. Hillary Clinton, exact same thing. Goes to Wellesley, spends her entire life in the ruling class, and she's still whining about how she's discriminated against. Why are they doing that?
Yeah. And did you ever see, they'll have like pictures of side by side, but it'll be like pictures of like Jimmy Carter's house and Obama's house.
Exactly.
And it totally represents something about the like corroding of our soul, that you're like, we would allow people who call themselves public servants, which of course is ridiculous. They're not, but still, they don't even have to pretend to keep up a facade of that. Like,
exactly.
You get to live in this insane like mansion off what? Because you were president and you get to cash in on that now?
In a white neighborhood.
And I think that's something to point out in regards to this talk that Michelle Obama could destroy Donald Trump in the election, which is, yes, currently she may be polling decently because she has been out of the public eye for a very long time. Biden, Harris, even Newsom and Whitmer, they get covered by the media constantly. But hey, Michelle Obama, she has name recognition, and frankly, not a lot of people are thinking about or remembering her at the current moment. But in the hypothetical event, and I'm not really even saying it's likely, but we're just addressing some of those rumors here today, right? That Michelle was put in, all these things are going to come up. And would Michelle Obama be able to defend against any of this? No, because despite the way that Democrats have portrayed Michelle Obama since 2008 as this Oprah Winfrey savior, graceful type of figure, in reality, she is firstly a nasty person, and secondly, a complete fraud, right? This old claim of, oh, she faced so much racism and sexism throughout her life. Clearly, you can see that is not true.
You should be required to live in the hood if you're Barack Obama and
if you're using that card.
You use that card. The only reason you got elected was because of your race. You spent your entire 8 years inflaming race hate in our country, and then you go to Martha's Vineyard, the whitest zip code in the world.
Yeah,
not allowed. Yeah, you're not allowed to do that.
Well, it also, I mean, it did so much damage. His inflaming racial hatred, and I'll say after, Barack Obama's campaign in 2008, first of all, it was just leaving how you feel about the guy aside, it was an amazing campaign. It was unlike anything that had ever been run before.
It was genius.
Yes, it was totally brilliant. It was now, of course, it wasn't what they presented it as. It wasn't like a grassroots campaign. He was approved of by the powers that be.
Of course.
He didn't just happen to, as a junior senator, get like a primetime speaking slot in 2004 where he gave that speech.
He wasn't even a senator yet.
Was he a state senator still at the time?
That's when I first met Barack Obama.
Yeah.
Walking down the street, smoking a cigarette in Boston on my way to dinner at the Palm. I'll never forget it. And I met him and Jesse Jackson Jr. They pulled over to say hi to me.
Really?
And I'd never heard his name. And I covered politics for a living.
Right.
And he gave the keynote at the end of that week. That was Sunday night. He spoke on Thursday. And Yeah, he was not a U.S. senator. Right. That was the campaign. It was great. It was absolutely crazy.
So it was clearly kind of orchestrated by some powerful
by
people.
The Pritzker family, of course.
Listen, the speeches that he gave and much of the message, first off, there's probably a lot of things that I would have agreed with him that he was running on. I agreed with a lot of things George W. Bush ran on in the year 2000.
Well, I'll tell you what I agreed with.
Turned around and didn't govern like that at all.
Let's sort of like elect the black guy and get past the race stuff. I loved that.
Well, especially because that was his message.
That was his message. And
let's get past the race stuff.
I love that.
He goes, there was a broader, more unified.
And yes, considering that the Obamas have been trending a lot recently because of all of this news around Joe Biden, perhaps this is worth remembering. The Obamas from the start have been a fraud. Barack himself claimed to be this grassroots candidate who rose off of his hope and inspiration when in reality, like Dave Smith and Tucker Carlson bring up, he was completely astroturfed. Michelle Obama claims to be some lifelong victim of racism, clearly not the case. And then despite all of the talk about race, during his presidency, ultimately, where does he live now? The whitest zip code in the United States tells you a lot that you need to know. And by the way, even on the front of him being sort of unifying on the race front in the 2008 campaign and then being totally divisive as president, yeah, that tells you a lot as well about the fraud that the Obamas always have been.
Thing. I mean, I remember because he was such a powerful, public speaker. I mean, he never really said anything. But it would still be beautiful.
Yes.
I remember in his acceptance speech at 2008 at the DNC, we had this whole line where he was like, I love this country, and so do you, and so does John McCain. The men and women who have fought for this country have been Republicans and Democrats and independents, but they fought together and died together, not defending a red America or a blue America, the United States of America. And it's like, and then it's like, he didn't really say anything there, but but it was beautifully put.
I'm 100% for that.
Yeah, the message was great. And look, he also was very critical of the George W. Bush administration's excesses.
By the way, Joe Biden tries to do the same thing. The only difference is he doesn't have the charisma. But yeah, very similar figures when you break it down. Both of them try to give these fake unifying speeches about how they're bipartisan and they love the country in general. But you can tell by the way they govern and the things they actually do, that's not true at all. So you have two fake unifiers in chief back to back here for the Democrats.
Listen, I'm going to end the war in Iraq. I'm going to reinstitute habeas corpus. We're going to end torture. There were a lot of, he didn't do any of that. I guess he ended the war in Iraq eventually and then reinvaded the country because the ISIS fighters he was arming invaded the country. But then I think essentially what happened, and it was around Obama's re-election campaign, this is where things really went off the rails in this country, was that he got in there and continued and expanded all the worst of the Bush policies.
Oh, of course.
And so they almost had nothing to run on. And so they decided to pivot to a culture war instead. And this is...
a lot of this talk, you may be asking, why are you talking about the Obamas right now? Sound familiar?
This was a decision, and again, I don't know exactly what the conspiracy is, but this decision was made from the top down. That I think it was a response to Obama's failures. It was a response to these movements like the Tea Party and Occupy Wall Street, which were getting a little bit too close.
That's right.
A little bit too close to the target. And all this, I'm sure you've looked at this before, but where there's these nexus charts and you can chart out like how many times all the woke terms are used, transgenderism, all that. And it's all like right around 2012 that it's all of a sudden like, systemic racism goes from being mentioned like this many times throughout history to like shooting up, like the New York Times and the Washington Post.
It's a very famous graph, and I've used it many times in trying to explain this, but that's exactly right. Like, fight amongst yourselves.
Yep.
So a couple takeaways. Firstly, you note that the Obama family are complete frauds and always have been. But bigger than that, I think we also got a good outline of a common Democrat playbook. Doesn't that sound so familiar? When things are not going well for your administration, you turn to the culture wars. Obama back in 2012 and beyond started to make it really about race. What is Biden doing right now? Mainly abortion, feminist rights, all that stuff, and January 6th, right? Kind of pick something that you think might galvanize your base and ultimately distract everyone from the real issues going on in the country, especially in regards to the policies of your presidency. So think that video tells a lot. And again, just remember, because if they try to start astroturfing Michelle Obama into this race, because some people are talking about it, just a few things to keep in mind here. With that said, folks, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comment section down below. What do you think of of Dave Smith and Tucker Carlson's comments. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, Alpha Moves only. God bless. Have a very great rest of your day, and peace.